Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Abby and I make weekend vlogs and cozy bookish content here on YouTube. And today we are going through my February reads and my March TBR, so let's get into it. February has been such a good reading month for me. I read 5 books and I'm currently averaging about a book a week this year. But to read 5 books in the shortest month of the year, I am so impressed with myself. So let's go through everything that I read. I have 3 physical books here and the other 2 are either books that I've given away since reading them or they are on my Kindle. So let's go through. The first book that I read was my March book club read, and that is The 4 Winds by Kristen Hannah. This is what my cover looks like. So I go to a book club, I pay £10 a month, and that means you get the book and get to go to the meeting. This book is set in 1920s/1930s America, during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, that kind of era of history, basically. So our female main character is Elsa Martinelli. Basically, she falls pregnant to someone that her family don't approve with. They get married and then it follows their life with their children, and they are trying to decide whether to stay on their family farm, which is experiencing a drought and they are really struggling, malnourished, or whether they should head to California to try and seek out a better life. I've never really read any stories set in this part of history. It's not something I know a lot about, so I was really intrigued, but I absolutely loved this book. I gave this book a 4.5 star on Goodreads. I was so surprised with how much I like it. I really like that you get to see it from a couple of different characters' perspectives, and it will switch characters' perspective halfway through a chapter, which is a little bit confusing sometimes, but I didn't mind it. It was really educational. I learned a lot about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and how people migrated to California. It taught me so much, and I feel like it's really made me more knowledgeable on that part of history, which I'm super grateful for. I thought it was great to see the connections between so many different groups of people. There's elements of communism weaved in through here as well, and about the riots and the strikes. It's not an author I really knew anything about. I knew that she wrote The Nightingale, which is also on my TBR, and I am much more intrigued to read The Nightingale now that I've read this one. Yeah, this was such a good book, so this gets a 4.5 star. The next book I have to show you is The Executioners 3 by Susan Dennard. This was just a random one that I picked up when I was in Waterstones. It wasn't one that was like on my TBR for absolutely ages. I had a 20 quid budget, I went into Waterstones and I picked up a couple of books, and this is the one that interested me. So this one follows the main character, Freddie Geller, when she calls the police on the rival school for drinking in a field, and then later on they basically discover a body, and it follows this historical town where there's essentially this poem or prophecy called The Executioners 3, and she finds it strange that murders keep happening in correlation to the murders in The Executioners 3. Initially they're put down to suicide, but Freddie doesn't believe that, and it's about her trying to uncover the truth of The Executioners 3 and these murders. For me, I think I gave it a 3 or a 3.5 star. I can't remember, but I'll put it up on the screen. I did enjoy it. I thought it was a nice book. The thing that I didn't enjoy is maybe this is a little bit more YA, purely because it follows high school children, and where I'm a little bit older, I found that narrative a little bit hard to read, and maybe that's a personal issue, but to me this was a little bit more YA, something I would have preferred a few years ago, but it was a nice story and I did enjoy it. I'm sorry if you can hear any banging in the background. My boyfriend is putting a shelf up in our kitchen, so don't mind that. That is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is quite a popular series, and I really liked this book actually. So I read 2 books this month, both based on a trial and different magical powers and things like that, and I'll explain the other one to you in a little bit. But this one essentially is about the elites who gained these powers in their town, and then you have the ordinaries, and the king is trying to basically eradicate the ordinaries and have the elites as the supreme race. They essentially have a purging trial, which is kind of Hunger Games vibes, to take out the weakest in the society and only have the strongest. And this book follows the protagonist Peyton Gray as she goes into these trials. This is a dual narrative book, so it follows Kai Aza and Peyton Gray, and it switches each chapter. So I don't remember how many stars I gave it. I want to say I gave it a 4, I'm pretty sure. But again, I'll put it up on the screen. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I am going to read the rest of the series, I think. I think there's a couple more books. There's some like novellas maybe, I could be wrong. But I am going to read the rest of this series eventually. I'm going to give it a little bit of a break because I've read a lot of trial-based books, but I will definitely be finishing this series. The next books that I read, again, I don't have the physical copies of, so I'm sorry. But the next book that I read was Never Lie by Frida McFadden. I really enjoyed this book. I read it cover to cover on a 3.5-hour flight back from Morocco. I do have a Morocco vlog if you want to watch it. It was such a quick read, such a good thriller. I just could not put it down. It was amazing. The reason I don't have the copy of it is that I gave it to another lady on the flight who was also reading a Frida McFadden because she hadn't read Never Lie, so I gave it to her. Never Lie is my friend Nikki's favourite Frida McFadden book, and she was the one who suggested that I read it, and I'm so glad that I did. Essentially, the story is this couple go to buy a house that used to be owned by a psychologist who allegedly passed away or disappeared. I can't really remember the story in that respect, but she went missing. So they were going to buy her house, and then our protagonist starts listening to all these tapes that she recorded with her clients and tries to uncover what happened to her and the truth behind it all, essentially. It's a bit of a complicated story to explain, but it was such a good quick read thriller. Absolutely loved it. I'm pretty sure I gave it like a 4.5 star or a 5 star. I can't remember, but I definitely want to read more Frida McFadden's because I loved The Housemaid and I loved this one. And I just bought another one on Prime Reading for when my Kindle arrives for my birthday, so I'll be reading that very shortly. Final book I read this month was another one of the Fairy Trials books, similar to Powerless. I said I read 2 this month. The other one was The Fairy Guild Trials by G.L. Preston. So in this one, there is also a trial where it's a fight to the death. However, this one, it is a fight over the crown. She essentially works for her father and kills anyone who is doing something wrong in society that her father doesn't agree with. She will go and kill them. And then when the king of the whole kingdom dies, there is a fight for who's going to take the throne. And her dad, I believe, puts her in for the trial to contend for the crown. So there's 2 main groups in the society. You have the Seelie and the Unseelie. And I feel like they could have gone a bit more into depth as to what that meant. But there were also vampires, fairies, all these other types of creatures in the society as well. It wasn't just the Seelie and Unseelie. So it's really interesting to see how all those groups of people use their powers to the best of their abilities. It's so difficult. I can't remember them all because I read that one and Powerless back to back, and they are very similar books. But I did really enjoy this book. I can tell you that for sure, but I am a bit fuzzy on the details. Also a bit of romance and a bit of a love triangle in this book. If that is your thing, you'll probably really enjoy the Fairy Guild Trials. But yeah, I thought this was such a good book. I really enjoyed it. I can't decide whether I prefer this one or the Fairy Guild Trials, but again, I'll leave my star rating on the screen. I'm going to have a little bit of a think about it before I upload this video, so I will leave my star rating up on the screen. So that is all 5 books that I read in February. Now let's get on to my January TBR. The first book I want to read is The Cat in the City by Nick Bradley, and I am already reading this actually. It is essentially about a cat in the city, and I think it's about interweaving lives. So at the moment I've read about 4 or 5 stories about different people in Japan, and all of them involve a cat, and I think it's gonna kind of interweave their lives at some point, which is quite interesting. I don't think I've ever read a book set in Japan. I could be wrong, but I don't think I've read a book set in Japan. So this is a little bit different, and I'm enjoying it. And similarly to The Four Winds, it's just about learning about different cultures and different countries. So we're going to see how I get on with that one. But I also really want to read 4 Seasons in Japan, which he wrote. So hopefully if this one is good, I'll also move on to that one. The next book I want to read is Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is another classic fantasy book. I think this is going to be quite a quick read fantasy book, to my knowledge, but I'm really excited to read it actually. I think the cover art is absolutely beautiful for it, and I wanted a fantasy that feels a little bit lighter. I've been reading lots of fantasies that have these dark, mysterious covers. I wanted something that felt a little bit lighter and brighter, so that's why I've decided to read this one. And essentially it's that she learns that her true love, or the love of her life, is due to marry someone else, so she strikes a deal with the King of Hearts, and in exchange for his help she then has to go on like a mission of some sort. I'm not too sure what. Fight to the death, the types of fantasies that I've been reading recently. It feels a little bit lighter and more fun, which is exactly what I wanted for the start of spring. So I'm very excited to read that, and I'm going to be reading that one on my Kindle when I get it for my birthday. Another book that I've already started to read is The House in the Cerulean Sea. I can't remember who this is by, I'm really sorry, I'll put it up on the screen. I'm listening to this one on BookBeat. I have a 30-day BookBeat subscription going at the moment, like a free trial type of thing. So I'm listening to The House in the Cerulean Sea on that one. This one is also a fantasy, but again, a much lighter, brighter, less serious fantasy. Very different vibes to anything I've read recently. It is someone who works in the Department for Magical Children, and he goes visiting orphanages for magical children to assess if they are safe and can stay open. And he is assigned to the House in the Cerulean Sea, which is just on a little island, and it is a house with some very complex children, including the spawn of Satan himself. Doesn't sound very light and bright, but I think it will be. I've been listening to it whilst I've been doing my gardening this weekend, and I'm really getting into it. I think I'm a few hours in now. And I'm really liking it just because it is a fantasy, but it is such a different type of fantasy. And I felt like I needed something different to break up what I've been reading recently. So I'm really excited to finish that one. And I think it's going to be quite a highly rated read on my Goodreads. So stay tuned, follow along, subscribe to my channel if you want to see what I think of these books, by the way, guys, because I'm going to do one of these every month. The final book on my March TBR is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I think this goes without saying, but the Wuthering Heights film with Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie is out, and I've heard mixed reviews about it in terms of its authenticity to the original story. So before I go and see the film in cinema or watch it on whatever platform it comes out on, I want to read the book so that I can kind of make my own critique of how accurate I think the story is to the original Emily Bronte book. So I really want to read that, and again I think I'm either going to get this on Libby on my Kindle through my library, or I'm going to go to my library and pick up a copy of Wuthering Heights. But that is on my TBR for this month. I feel like I've done a lot of talking, but that is all of the books that I read in February, and I'm so happy that I read 5 in the shortest month of the year. And also my TBR for March, I've got a good variety in there. I've got some fantasy and different types of fantasy. I've got a book set in a different country to anything I've ever read before, and I've got a classic. So I feel like I've got a good variety in there, and I think it's going to be a really interesting month. And again, I wanted books that are a little bit lighter and brighter. I do have another few books in mind that are lighter, brighter types of books for if I finish my 4-book TBR, but I don't want to give myself too much to read and feel restricted or feel pressured to finish it. So I've given myself 4 books, but I do have a few more in mind if I get round to them. So again, subscribe. You can watch my what I read in March video in about a month's time, and you can see if I read anything else. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I have loved sitting down and talking books. It is one of my favourite things to do at the minute. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next month for another one of these videos.